Move him out of that seat. It belongs to a real VIP. The words cracked through the quiet first-class cabin so sharply that conversation stopped before the aircraft doors had even closed. Every head turned toward seat 1A, where Marcus Ellison sat with the calm confidence of someone who had absolutely nothing to prove. Dressed in a plain black polo, faded blue jeans, and spotless white sneakers, he looked more like a traveler heading home after a long business trip than the founder of a multi-billion-dollar investment company. That was exactly how he wanted it. Marcus had learned years ago that appearances often revealed more about the people judging than the person being judged. Flight attendant Nicole Parker marched down the aisle carrying a polished leather boarding wallet. Without checking the tablet in her hand, she stopped beside Marcus and forced a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Sir, there's been a seating adjustment," she announced. "Please gather your things." Marcus slowly looked up. "Is there a problem with my ticket?" Nicole barely glanced at the boarding pass he offered. "That seat has been reassigned." Before Marcus could respond, a tall white passenger wearing an expensive navy blazer rolled his carry-on beside the row. Richard Collins smiled as though the outcome had already been decided. "Glad they fixed the mistake," he said with a chuckle. Nicole took Marcus's boarding pass, folded it once, and turned toward Richard. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Collins. Your VIP seat is ready." She handed Richard the boarding pass sleeve that still carried Marcus's seat assignment, as if transferring ownership in plain sight. A quiet murmur spread through the cabin. Several passengers exchanged confused looks. An elderly couple near the window frowned. A young mother paused while helping her son buckle his seat belt. Across the aisle, Emily Carter lowered the novel she had been reading, unable to ignore what was unfolding only a few feet away. Marcus remained seated. His expression never changed. "Did you verify the passenger?" he asked evenly. "Or did you simply decide who looked like they belonged here?" Nicole's smile disappeared. "Sir, I'm asking you one last time. Please cooperate." Richard laughed softly. "Some people always think the rules don't apply to them." Marcus looked at him for only a second before returning his attention to Nicole. "Interesting," he replied. "Because I was about to say the same thing." The cabin grew noticeably quieter. Even the overhead announcements seemed distant beneath the growing tension. At the rear galley, Jordan Hayes, a newly hired flight attendant still completing his probationary months, glanced down at the electronic passenger manifest. His eyes paused on seat 1A. Then he looked toward Marcus. Then back at the screen. His heartbeat quickened. The name displayed in bold letters was unmistakable. Marcus Ellison. Confirmed. Verified. VIP priority. Jordan looked up again as Nicole confidently motioned for Richard Collins to sit down in the very seat assigned to Marcus. Richard smiled, loosened his jacket, and settled into the leather chair without hesitation. Marcus quietly stood, stepped into the aisle, and watched the exchange without raising his voice. There was no anger in his face, only disappointment that seemed far older than the moment itself. Emily reached for her phone, not to create a spectacle, but because something deep inside told her that truth deserved witnesses. Around them, conversations faded into complete silence. Nobody could explain why the man who held the valid reservation had just watched his own seat handed to someone else. Nobody except the people who had made the decision. And none of them realized that the next 5 minutes would become the most expensive 5 minutes of their entire careers. Marcus Ellison neither reached for the seat nor argued over it. Instead, he folded his boarding pass sleeve once and slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket with the same measured precision that had carried him through billion-dollar negotiations where impatience always cost more than silence. Nicole Parker interpreted his composure as surrender. She smiled confidently before turning her attention toward Richard Collins. "Is there anything else I can bring you before departure, sir?" she asked warmly. Richard leaned back, crossed one leg over the other, and adjusted the premium blanket that had originally been waiting on Marcus's seat. "A sparkling water would be great," he replied before glancing toward Marcus. Funny how these situations always sort themselves out. A few nearby passengers exchanged uneasy looks. The remark was quiet enough to sound casual, but loud enough for everyone within 3 rows to understand exactly what he meant. Marcus simply watched him for a moment before calmly asking Nicole, "May I ask one simple question?" She folded her arms. "Make it quick." Marcus nodded politely. "Did anyone verify the boarding records before removing a confirmed passenger?" Nicole sighed dramatically. Sir, experienced crew members know how to identify potential seating issues long before the computer catches them. Marcus tilted his head slightly. So appearance outweighed verification. I did not say that, Nicole answered sharply. You did not have to, Marcus replied. The words settled over the cabin like heavy clouds before a storm. Across the aisle, Emily Carter quietly unlocked her phone. She had no intention of posting anything online. She simply wanted an accurate record because something about the entire exchange felt deeply unfair. 2 rows behind her, a retired Air Force veteran whispered to his wife, "That gentleman has been respectful the entire time." She nodded without taking her eyes off Marcus. Near the galley, Jordan Hayes stared at the electronic manifest again. He refreshed the screen twice, convinced he must have overlooked something. The result never changed. Seat 1 Alpha remained assigned to Marcus Ellison. VIP priority. Confirmed. There was no notation for reassignment, operational upgrade, or equipment change. Every company procedure he had memorized during training pointed to one conclusion. The wrong passenger had been seated. Jordan looked toward Nicole, then back to the screen, his conscience pulling harder with every passing second. Just then, Captain Daniel Brooks stepped into the first-class cabin after completing a final discussion with the gate supervisor. Nicole approached him immediately with a reassuring smile. "Captain, we had a small seating issue, but it has already been resolved." Daniel glanced briefly toward Marcus, who still stood quietly beside the aisle without showing the slightest sign of frustration. "Everything under control?" he asked. "Completely," Nicole answered before Marcus could speak. The passenger simply misunderstood his boarding assignment. Marcus looked directly at the captain. "Would you be willing to verify that personally before the aircraft departs?" Daniel hesitated for only a moment before answering. "Our cabin crew is trained to handle seating matters. I trust their judgment." Marcus nodded once. "Trust is valuable," he said softly. "Verification is priceless." The captain offered a polite but distracted smile and continued toward the cockpit, unaware that Jordan had already taken one careful step forward with the manifest still glowing in his trembling hands. For the first time since boarding began, someone on the crew was preparing to choose between protecting a supervisor and protecting the truth. Jordan Hayes swallowed hard as he looked from the glowing passenger manifest to Marcus Ellison and then toward Nicole Parker, whose confidence seemed untouched by the facts displayed on the screen. Every line of his training repeated inside his mind. Verify first. Speak with respect. Protect every passenger equally. Yet the atmosphere inside the first-class cabin made those simple rules suddenly feel dangerous. He took another cautious step forward. "Nicole," he said quietly, "I think we should review the manifest one more time." She turned sharply, her expression tightening before she even heard the rest of his sentence. "There is nothing to review." Jordan held up the company tablet. Seat 1 Alpha is still assigned to Marcus Ellison. There is no reassignment in the system. Richard Collins let out a short laugh from the leather seat. "The rookie does not know how these flights work yet." Nicole answered before Jordan could continue. "Operational decisions are not always reflected immediately. We are moving forward." Marcus remained completely still. His hands rested loosely at his sides while his eyes followed every exchange with remarkable patience. He did not interrupt. He did not raise his voice. He simply watched people reveal exactly who they were when they believed no consequences were coming. Emily Carter slowly stood from her seat. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I watched this gentleman present a valid boarding pass before anyone else boarded this section. If there has been a change, could someone please explain it?" Nicole forced another smile, but it carried none of the warmth expected from a flight attendant. "Ma'am, we appreciate your concern, but this is an internal matter." Emily did not sit back down. Respectfully, it became everyone's concern the moment a passenger lost his assigned seat without an explanation. Several travelers nodded in agreement. A businessman near the bulkhead closed his laptop and removed his headphones. An older woman folded her magazine across her lap. The quiet luxury of the cabin had slowly transformed into something heavier, as though every person on board sensed they were witnessing more than a simple seating disagreement. Captain Daniel Brooks returned from the cockpit after noticing the unexpected delay. His eyes moved across the silent passengers before stopping on Nicole. "Why are we still boarding?" Nicole answered immediately. "The situation is under control." This passenger refuses to accept the updated seating arrangement. Daniel finally looked directly at Marcus. Sir, I would appreciate your cooperation so we can depart on schedule. Marcus answered with the same calm tone he had used from the beginning. Captain, I have cooperated from the moment I boarded. I have only asked for one thing. Verify the records before asking a paying passenger to surrender his assigned seat. Daniel glanced toward Jordan. Does the system show anything unusual? Jordan hesitated. Every second felt longer than the last. Then he spoke. No, Captain. The reservation remains exactly as Mr. Ellison described. Nicole immediately stepped between them. The system has been slow all morning. I have already handled this. Daniel looked uncertain for the first time, but before he could ask another question, Richard Collins leaned forward with obvious impatience. Captain, are we really delaying an entire flight over one man who cannot accept that mistakes happen? Marcus slowly turned toward Richard. Mistakes happen, he replied quietly. Patterns are choices. Those 4 words settled over the cabin with unmistakable weight. Nobody answered. Nobody even shifted in their seats. Somewhere beyond the windows, the ground crew continued preparing the aircraft for departure, unaware that inside the cabin the real journey had only just begun. The silence inside the cabin no longer felt comfortable. It carried weight, pressing against every passenger who had witnessed the exchange from the moment Marcus Ellison first presented his boarding pass. Emily Carter slowly stepped into the aisle, her voice calm but impossible to ignore. Captain, I travel every week for work, and I have never seen a passenger removed from an assigned seat without anyone verifying the record first. Captain Daniel Brooks looked toward her with professional restraint. Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but we ask that passengers allow the crew to handle operational matters. Emily nodded respectfully. Then handle them correctly. Several heads turned. The statement was not emotional. It was simple, direct, and difficult to dismiss. Jordan Hayes tightened his grip on the company tablet. Every instinct told him remaining silent would be easier. Every value he believed in told him silence would also make him responsible. He took a careful breath before speaking clearly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Captain, I personally checked the manifest 3 separate times. Seat 1 Alpha is assigned to Mr. Marcus Ellison. There are no updates, no operational changes, and no authorization transferring that seat. Nicole Parker immediately stepped forward. Jordan, that is enough. He looked at her with visible hesitation but did not lower the tablet. Our procedures require verification before moving any confirmed passenger. Nicole's expression hardened. I am your supervisor. Jordan answered quietly. Yes, but the records are still the records. The atmosphere shifted almost instantly. Passengers who had remained silent began exchanging uneasy glances. A businessman in the second row spoke without standing. If the computer confirms his seat, why is someone else sitting there? An older woman near the window added. This should not be difficult to fix. Richard Collins leaned back comfortably as though none of the growing concern applied to him. Everyone is making far too much of this. We are delaying an entire flight because one man cannot accept reality. Marcus finally looked directly at Richard. His voice remained measured, almost gentle. Reality is exactly what I have been asking everyone to verify. Emily slowly raised her phone, keeping it lowered near her chest rather than pointing it toward anyone's face. She was not interested in embarrassing the crew. She simply believed that truth deserved an accurate witness. A young couple across the aisle quietly did the same. No one shouted. No one argued. The cabin had become something far more powerful than loud disagreement. It had become a room filled with people paying close attention. Captain Brooks looked back toward Jordan. Are you absolutely certain about what you are seeing? Jordan unlocked the screen again and rotated the tablet so the captain could read it himself. The display remained unchanged. Passenger, Marcus Ellison. Seat, 1 Alpha. Status, confirmed. VIP priority. Daniel studied the information longer than expected. The confidence in his posture faded ever so slightly. Nicole noticed it immediately. Captain, the gate is waiting for us. We cannot continue delaying departure over a software issue. Marcus answered before Daniel could respond. A software issue does not explain a human decision. Those words settled over the first-class cabin with quiet precision. Nobody rushed to answer because everyone understood the difference. Computers recorded facts. People chose actions. Outside the aircraft, baggage carts continued moving across the ramp beneath the afternoon sun. Inside, every passing second pulled the truth closer to the surface. And for the first time since boarding had begun, Captain Daniel Brooks began wondering whether the greatest threat to the flight schedule was not the passenger standing calmly beside the aisle, but the decision his own crew had already made. Captain Daniel Brooks lowered the tablet without saying a word. The confirmation was sitting directly in front of him, impossible to explain away, yet the cabin remained frozen between facts and assumptions. Nicole Parker sensed the hesitation immediately. She stepped forward before the captain could speak. "We cannot continue debating this," she said firmly. "The boarding process has to move forward." Her voice carried the confidence of someone who believed authority alone could outweigh evidence. Marcus Ellison remained exactly where he was, his posture relaxed, his expression composed. He looked toward the captain rather than Nicole. "I am still waiting for one simple decision," he said quietly. "Will this airline follow its records, or someone's opinion?" Before Daniel could answer, Nicole reached toward Marcus's carry-on bag resting beside the seat. "Sir, if you are unwilling to relocate voluntarily, I will have your belongings moved to your new seat." Marcus calmly placed one hand on the handle of the suitcase before she could lift it. There was no struggle, no raised voice, only a clear boundary. "Please do not touch my property," he said. The words were respectful, yet unmistakably firm. For a brief second, the entire cabin seemed to stop breathing. Emily Carter looked from Marcus to Nicole in disbelief. "He has not interrupted anyone," she said. "He has not insulted anyone. He has only asked you to verify the truth." Several passengers nodded silently. Richard Collins rolled his eyes. "This has become ridiculous," he muttered. "People like him always want exceptions instead of accepting the answer." Marcus turned toward him slowly. "No," he replied. "People like me ask that the same rules apply to everyone." Richard looked away without responding. The sentence landed harder than anyone expected. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Somewhere deep inside Marcus, another memory quietly surfaced. He was 11 years old, sitting beside his father at a rural bus station after a long summer baseball tournament. They had purchased tickets just like everyone else. Yet an employee insisted another family should board first because it would be less complicated. Marcus remembered looking at his father, waiting for anger. Instead, his father simply smiled, placed a hand on his shoulder, and whispered, "Never confuse someone else's prejudice with your own worth. Let character speak longer than emotion." Those words had followed Marcus through every stage of his life, through college, through boardrooms, through billion-dollar negotiations, and now into the first-class cabin of an airplane where history seemed determined to repeat itself. The memory faded as quickly as it had appeared. Marcus returned to the present without the slightest change in his expression. Captain Brooks studied him carefully. There was no hostility in the man standing before him, only patience. That realization unsettled him more than any argument could have. Jordan Hayes quietly stepped beside the captain and lowered his voice. "Sir, every procedure manual we have says we should restore the confirmed passenger to his assigned seat." Daniel remained silent. Nicole folded her arms. "Captain, every minute we delay costs this airline money." Marcus finally allowed himself the faintest smile. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the most expensive decisions are the ones people believe will save time." Those words lingered in the air as Daniel looked once more at the glowing manifest, then at Richard Collins comfortably occupying a seat that clearly did not belong to him. Outside the aircraft, the jet bridge remained connected, the cabin door still open, and somewhere far beyond the terminal walls, a sequence of events had already begun moving toward the gate. Even though no one inside the airplane realized the next chapter had already been set into motion. Captain Daniel Brooks remained motionless, the electronic manifest still glowing in his hands as if it refused to let the truth disappear. Around him, the first-class cabin had become unusually quiet. Even passengers who had never exchanged a word with one another now seemed connected by the same unanswered question. If the records were clear, why had nothing been corrected? Marcus Ellison reached calmly into his jacket and removed his phone. There was no dramatic movement, no visible frustration, only the quiet confidence of someone who understood exactly what came next. Nicole Parker noticed immediately. "Sir, personal phone calls are not permitted while we are preparing for departure." she said with renewed authority. Marcus looked at her politely. This call will take less than 30 seconds. Before she could respond, he touched the screen and placed the phone beside his ear. The call connected almost instantly. Rachel, he said in a calm voice, begin Executive Response Protocol 7. There was no hesitation on the other end. Confirmed, Mr. Ellison. Protocol 7 is now active. Corporate operations, legal, human resources, flight compliance, and executive security have been notified. Live documentation has begun. Marcus answered with only 2 words. Thank you. He ended the call and quietly slipped the phone back into his pocket. Nicole exchanged an amused glance with Richard Collins. Executive Response Protocol? Richard laughed softly. That is certainly creative. Marcus offered no reply. Captain Brooks watched him carefully. Something about the conversation had not sounded rehearsed. There had been no panic, no empty threats, only precise language delivered with complete certainty. Jordan Hayes felt a vibration from the company tablet in his hands. A new notification appeared across the screen. Internal review session initiated. Flight activity locked pending executive verification. His eyes widened. He refreshed the display once, believing it had to be a system error. The notification remained. Another alert appeared only seconds later. Preserve all crew communications. Compliance monitoring active. Jordan slowly looked toward the captain. Sir, he whispered, the operations system just entered review mode. Daniel stepped closer and read the message himself. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. This was not a feature that activated during ordinary customer complaints. It required executive authorization at the highest level. Nicole noticed them staring at the screen. What is it now? She asked impatiently. Jordan hesitated before answering. Corporate just locked the flight record. Nicole dismissed the statement with a wave of her hand. Someone probably pressed the wrong button at headquarters. Marcus quietly looked toward the cabin windows where the afternoon sunlight reflected across the wing. Systems rarely press the wrong buttons, he said. People do. Emily Carter lowered her phone for the first time since the confrontation had begun. She noticed something else changing. Gate agents outside the aircraft had stopped walking away. 2 supervisors had arrived near the jet bridge entrance and were speaking into headsets while looking toward the aircraft door. The boarding clock continued counting upward, but nobody seemed concerned about the departure anymore. Every passing second carried the strange feeling that the airplane itself had become the center of something much larger than a disagreement over one seat. Captain Brooks received a quiet chime from his company device. He unlocked it, expecting another operational reminder. Instead, a single message appeared across the screen in bold letters. Executive Oversight Team en route. Maintain current passenger positions. Await further instructions. Daniel slowly lowered the device. For the first time since boarding had begun, he no longer wondered whether Marcus Ellison was telling the truth. He wondered how much truth had already arrived before anyone inside the cabin realized who had just activated it. The quiet chime from Captain Daniel Brooks's company device echoed louder than any raised voice could have. He looked down again, hoping the message would disappear, but instead another notification appeared beneath the first. Executive Oversight connected. Live flight review active. Do not alter passenger assignments. Daniel felt the color drain from his face. Nicole Parker stepped closer, trying to glimpse the screen. What is corporate doing? She asked with growing irritation. Daniel did not answer immediately. His eyes moved from the message to Marcus Ellison, who still stood calmly beside the aisle as though he had expected every second of this. Richard Collins shifted uneasily in seat 1 Alpha. The confidence that had carried him through the confrontation was beginning to fade. Captain, he said with an uneasy laugh. This is getting a little dramatic, is it not? Marcus finally looked toward him. Truth usually feels dramatic to people who never expected it to arrive. The cabin fell silent once again. Jordan Hayes felt another vibration from the company tablet. This time the screen automatically opened without requiring a password. Across the display appeared a secure executive profile. A professional headshot filled the screen. The name beneath it read Marcus Ellison. Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Ellison Capital. Strategic Executive Partner. Principal Shareholder, Horizon Airways. Jordan stared at the screen for several seconds before looking back at Marcus. His voice almost disappeared into the silence. Captain, you need to see this. Daniel accepted the tablet with trembling hands. Every detail matched the man standing only a few feet away. The same calm eyes, the same understated smile, the same name that had appeared on the passenger manifest from the beginning. Nicole noticed the sudden change in Daniel's expression. "What is it?" she demanded. Daniel slowly lowered the tablet without taking his eyes off Marcus. Before he could speak, Marcus answered for him. "You removed me from a confirmed VIP seat without verifying the facts." He paused just long enough for every passenger to absorb the words. "You gave that seat to another passenger because someone decided appearances mattered more than records." Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Marcus continued in the same steady voice. "The seat itself was never the issue. The decision behind it was." Richard Collins stood up so quickly that the blanket slipped from his lap onto the floor. I did not know," he stammered. Marcus nodded politely. "No, you did not. But you accepted something that was never yours without asking a single question." Richard lowered his eyes, unable to respond. Nicole folded her arms one final time, refusing to surrender her certainty. "Even if you are important to this airline, policies still apply to everyone." Marcus met her gaze without the slightest trace of anger. "Exactly," he replied. "That is why I expected you to follow them." The sentence landed with unmistakable force. Daniel slowly removed his captain's hat for a brief moment, collecting himself before speaking. "Mr. Ellison, are you telling us that you are the executive partner listed in the system?" Marcus answered with quiet simplicity. "I am Marcus Ellison. I founded Ellison Capital. Our company became one of the largest investors in Horizon Airways 4 years ago, and today I remain one of the people responsible for helping keep this airline operating." The realization spread across the cabin like a wave. Emily Carter lowered her phone completely. Jordan stood frozen beside the galley. Richard stepped away from seat 1 Alpha without being asked. Nicole stared at Marcus in complete disbelief. Then the captain's company device chimed once more, and this time every person close enough to read the screen saw the same unmistakable words. "Executive board waiting. Immediate crew accountability review beginning now." Nobody spoke after the final notification appeared. The first-class cabin, once filled with quiet confidence and casual assumptions, had become a room where every heartbeat seemed louder than the engines outside. Captain Daniel Brooks stared at his company device as another secure message arrived. Executive Human Resources, Executive Compliance, Corporate Legal, all connected. A single instruction followed beneath the list. "Do not close the aircraft door. Await executive authorization." Daniel slowly lifted his eyes toward Marcus Ellison. The confidence he had carried only minutes earlier had vanished. "Mr. Ellison," he began carefully, "I owe you an apology." Marcus shook his head almost immediately. "An apology matters," he answered. "Accountability matters more." Before anyone could respond, Jordan Hayes looked down as his company tablet emitted another alert. One by one, the crew access profiles began changing status. Nicole Parker, flight privileges suspended pending investigation. Daniel Brooks, command authority temporarily suspended pending executive review. Cabin access credentials restricted. Jordan blinked several times before turning the screen toward the captain. Daniel read every line in complete silence. Nicole reached for her own company device with trembling hands. She unlocked the screen, but instead of the normal flight interface, a red notification filled the display. "Employee access unavailable. Please contact Executive Human Resources." She refreshed the screen again. The same message appeared. A third attempt produced no change. The realization settled across her face long before she spoke. This cannot be happening." Marcus looked at her with calm restraint. "It already has." Richard Collins quietly stepped away from seat 1 Alpha and faced Marcus. "I accepted that seat because I assumed the crew knew what they were doing," he admitted. "I should have questioned it." Marcus gave a small nod. When decent people stop asking questions, unfair decisions become easier to make. Richard lowered his head. There was nothing left to defend. Emily Carter slipped her phone back into her purse. She had started recording because something felt wrong. Now she realized the story had never been about a seat. It had been about whether facts could survive assumptions. Around the cabin, passengers remained silent, watching the consequences unfold without shouting, celebrating, or mocking anyone. Justice did not need applause. It only needed honesty. Captain Brooks received one final video call request on his company device. He accepted it immediately. A senior executive from airline headquarters appeared on the screen, with several members of the executive oversight team seated beside her. Her voice was professional and measured. Captain Brooks, after reviewing the passenger manifest, live operational records, crew communications, and executive verification, Horizon Airways is initiating immediate personnel action. Flight command will be transferred to a replacement crew currently approaching the aircraft. Until their arrival, your crew is relieved of active duty. Daniel quietly closed his eyes for a brief moment before answering. Understood. The executive continued. Mr. Ellison, thank you for allowing the review process to reach its conclusion. Every action taken today has been documented. Marcus simply replied, I wanted the truth to speak for itself. The call ended. Seconds later, Nicole's identification badge emitted a soft electronic tone before its indicator light changed from green to red. Daniel's badge followed. Cabin system access disappeared from both of their devices at the same moment. Jordan looked down at his own badge. It remained active. Another message appeared across his tablet. Thank you for protecting company policy with integrity. Continue supporting the incoming crew. Jordan exhaled slowly, almost unable to believe what he was reading. Outside the cabin windows, a new flight crew crossed the jet bridge carrying fresh flight bags. Inside, nobody celebrated the outcome. The only sound was the quiet realization that every decision made in those 5 minutes had changed several careers forever, not because power demanded it, but because the truth had finally been allowed to finish speaking. The replacement crew entered the aircraft with quiet professionalism, offering respectful greetings to the passengers before beginning their pre-departure checks. There were no dramatic announcements and no celebration. The atmosphere inside the cabin had changed in a different way. It had become reflective. People who had boarded expecting an ordinary flight now understood they had witnessed something far more important than a disagreement over a seat. Marcus Ellison stood beside the aisle while the new lead flight attendant approached him with a sincere expression. Mr. Ellison, she said, on behalf of Horizon Airways, I am truly sorry for what happened today. Your seat is ready whenever you are. Marcus smiled politely. Thank you, he replied. I appreciate your professionalism. He walked toward seat 1 Alpha without hurry, placing his carry-on in the overhead compartment before taking his seat. Richard Collins remained standing until Marcus had settled comfortably. Mr. Ellison, he said quietly, I cannot change what happened, but I can admit that I should have spoken up much sooner. I saw everyone following one assumption, and I followed it too. Marcus looked at him with the same calm expression he had carried from the beginning. Real character is measured by what we do after we recognize a mistake, he answered. I hope you remember today the next time someone is judged before they are known. Richard nodded slowly before returning to his own assigned seat, several rows back. Emily Carter watched the exchange with quiet admiration. She realized the most powerful moment of the day was not the executive review or the personnel decisions. It was the absence of anger from the man who had every reason to be angry. Jordan Hayes completed the final cabin inspection with renewed confidence. Before closing the overhead compartment near Marcus, he paused for a brief moment. Thank you, he said softly. Marcus looked up. For what? Jordan smiled. For reminding me that company values only matter when someone has the courage to live by them. Marcus nodded. Never be afraid to let the truth stand beside you. It is stronger than any title. Moments later, the aircraft door closed. The jet bridge pulled away, and the captain welcomed everyone aboard for the second time that afternoon. This greeting sounded different. It carried humility instead of routine. As the airplane slowly pushed back from the gate, sunlight reflected across the runway, filling the cabin with a warm golden glow. Marcus looked out the window, watching the terminal gradually disappear behind the wing. He thought about his father at the old bus station many years before, speaking words that had shaped every chapter of his life. Character always outlasts prejudice. That lesson had never failed him. Around the cabin, passengers returned to their conversations, but many carried a quiet understanding that appearances could never reveal the full story of another human being. Success did not always arrive wearing an expensive suit. Leadership did not always announce itself with titles. Sometimes true strength simply remained calm while everyone else rushed to judgment. As the aircraft lifted into the afternoon sky, Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment. grateful that the truth had needed neither anger nor revenge to prevail. It had required only patience, integrity, and the courage to let facts speak louder than assumptions. Before long, the city disappeared beneath the clouds. But one lesson remained perfectly clear for everyone who had witnessed those unforgettable 5 minutes. Respect should never be reserved for people who look important. It should be given freely to every person, because dignity is not earned by appearance, wealth, or status. It is the starting point for how every human being deserves to be treated.